Tom Gross joining us from London via Skype, international affairs commentator. Mr. Gross, Theresa May rolling the dice. You've been saying this since yesterday. Do you think that's the right move?
Yes, it is, because she was not elected. As you recall, she was almost appointed by her own party, and it's important for her to have her own mandate, so she can forge Brexit in the way she wants to forge it, which will not necessarily be to the liking of her own hard right pro-Brexit wing of her party. She inherited Brexit when she took over. Now she has a chance to get her own mandate, and it will be a large mandate. In spite of what Owen just said, under the British election, even if Corbyn goes up a bit in the polls, under the British first-past-the-post system, you only have to be a little bit ahead in the polls to win a huge majority of seats. So at the last election in 2015, the Conservative Party won 36.9%, and they got 331 seats. Labour only got 6% less of the vote at 30.2%, but they got only 232 seats. So at the present time, Jeremy Corbyn is way below what Ed Miliband got, the previous Labour leader, in 2015. So even if he goes up markedly, he'll still lose by a large a number of seats. This is not like the Electoral College in the United States, which is much closer and so on. It's not like the French election. The British system is very, very weighted to the party that comes first, even by a few percentage points, will give her a landslide in Parliament.
Now, Mr. Gross, just wondering with you, though, after these elections, and again, public opinion, because apparently it doesn't matter this day and age whether a politician promises his constituency or the voters and bears no standing on polls, but public opinion, at the end of the day, this was something that was clearly promised that will not happen by Theresa May herself, by the Tory party. What then? You know, what will this do to her standing? And also, isn't it dangerous, though? I mean, haven't we learned in 2016 and 17 not to trust landsliding polls?
Well, first of all, on public opinion, there are those who think that it's very undemocratic of her to call a snap election. She's really given no time to all the other parties to prepare. She said there'll be no time for television debates, and 7 weeks is really not a long time. So people, The Guardian yesterday, one commentator even compared it to a coup and compared her to the Turkish President Erdogan. Nevertheless, I think there's an understanding, even among lots of people who are against Brexit, that it's important for a Prime Minister to strengthen their hand to be in a strong position to negotiate, and not necessarily to negotiate a hard Brexit. Once she has her own election mandate, she could maybe do a much softer Brexit, which will disappoint her own party. So she does remain popular, but it's also a case that both the Labour Party and the Liberal Democratic Party have very weak or unpopular leaders. So it's not that difficult for her to be popular. It's partly the fault of the opposition parties for not having chosen stronger, more effective leaders.
Yeah, well, sadly, very little time that we have left. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn is going to survive this vote?
Well, there are already calls from members of his own Labour Party, members of Parliament, for him to resign even before the election and quickly have some new leader before, to put in place a couple of weeks before the election. But I think he will resign. I think he will hang on.
Mr. Gross, I'm going to stop you for a second. We'll continue with this right after the break.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick question, go back to something we were talking about before. Look, given that May has called these elections with a 22-point lead, with that poll showing her with her 22-point lead, isn't there a risk of her disappointing that expectation, that there's an expectation of a landslide that she won't be able to deliver? And what would that mean then for her mandate? And then the second part of that question is, if it's still the case that the Conservatives get an even larger majority, wouldn't that larger majority still include a whole lot of hard-line Brexit MPs that would still be able to create problems for her even after she wins this vote?
Well, first of all, you're right. One can never be sure about polls. And, there's a saying in British politics that a week is a long time in politics. We have 7 weeks before the election. However, the system is somewhat different. So unlike America, where, by the way, I, for one, predicted that Trump would win, I think it's almost impossible that Theresa May does not win this election. If she gets a smaller majority, she still won the election. It's still been her election, not David Cameron's election, and she can say, I was elected by the people. If she gets a large majority, as you point out, there'll be some hard right-wing members of parliament who will try to push her into a more hardline Brexit. But with a large majority in parliament, or a large Conservative majority, she will be able to afford to have some of those people vote against her. I mean, all kinds of scenarios could play out. She could have her hard Brexit members of the cabinet negotiate Brexit. They may not come up with a good deal, and she can turn around and say, that's good enough, not good enough, you're fired. And then she could go for a softer approach, altogether different than she's going for the moment. I'm not convinced that she herself wants a hard Brexit. She didn't even campaign for Brexit in last year's referendum.
No, thanks.
And Mr. Gross, I'm wondering with you also, when it comes to the demolishing, well, not the demolishing of labor, when it comes to other European countries looking around at what is happening right now, leading up to the French elections that are happening on
April 23rd.
April 23rd, that would be a Sunday.
And then May 7th, the second round.
And the second round. Mr. Gross, do you believe that this has effect on people voting there? Because there seems to be, the pendulum of history is swinging to the right all across Europe. But it's not going as smoothly, maybe, as people would have expected it to be. Do you think this will have an effect on that as well?
Well, I think we're in a very tumultuous period. You have the French elections where, there is a serious possibility that an extreme right-wing or an extreme left-wing candidate may win them. In both cases, they are anti-democratic and, quite frankly, repulsive. They don't believe in the basic freedoms that we've come to enjoy in Europe. I'm not sure that the French election will be affected by Theresa May's decision to call an early British election.
Obviously not.
But the German and British election results may be affected by the French election results. That's possible, yes.
No, that's a total fact. Mr. Gross, I want to thank you so much for joining us.